Traitless enemies are the 8th trait, the first trait introduced in the game. Why talk about them only in the third to last episode, you might ask? Well, you see, Traitless relevancy starts slightly later, which is why they're only mentioned now. Empire of Cats is full of traitless enemies, however, these are not really threatening as we all know. Tourist Cat is an example of an anti-traitless cat with guaranteed chance to freeze them for 1 second, as well as being resistant to them with single attack and a long cooldown to balance its abilities. You can get it by completing the advanced stage, Bomber Girl. While there are many strong traitless enemies, there are 2 stages I will discuss at the end of this video that are so deadly they deserve their own section. I appreciate the insane amount of support lately, and promise we will build the biggest Battle Cats community to exist and bring the game back to its prime. So make sure to subscribe to help us reach this goal. Well, here's the catch when it comes to traitless enemies. First of all, they, as well as other traits left in the series, do not have full treasures, meaning abilities like resistant, massive damage, and strong against are less effective on them. Second of all, Traitless has an insane lack of effective units, most of them either being dropped from advanced stages, or Fest exclusive, or other difficult feats like beating the Aku Realms for Jaindu. Therefore, most Traitless enemies have to be handled with more general units. With that being said, let's move on to the early game of Traitless enemies. Let's start off with Master A. He's one of the first enemies you will encounter on Stories of Legends. With it being in the final stage of the second subchapter, it serves as a backliner with 451 range, meaning your dragon cats will not be able to snipe it. Even Crazed Bahamut can't outrage him. Your best shot would be to try and tank him down with cats that are relatively bulky and can tank hits from him, or gacha units that can outrange him easily. In Pasta Desert and UL Remix of Tapas Desert, you will see him as an extremely high magnifications, making him nearly impossible to tank and making outranging him a must. The Slav comes not too far after Master A, with it being the final stage of the 4th subchapter. It has very similar bulk to EOC 3 Teacher Bunbun, which may sound scary at first, but his very low attack rate makes him mostly stand around times. But when he does attack, he deals over 8,000 damage, easily enough to kill everything on the field in higher magnifications. One of the most annoying stages it is part of is Pitfall Zone, a drawn out rather boring endurance battle with it and the face. You will need to take out 5 of them before the assassin bears spawn and take you out. Luckily, you have lots of time. Corey introduces a brand new mechanic to the game, Waves. Wave is an additional attack after the first attack that can easily pierce through your army, and deal full damage to everything it hits. Every level of Wave has roughly 267 piercing range, which makes Corey's level 4 Wave hit up to 1067.5 range ahead of him. This can be very dangerous. Luckily, a common gacha unit that exists to take care of an Octopus Cat. Octopus has the Wave Blocker ability, which blocks the waves from hitting units behind it. A great ability for a tanker like him. Using him trivializes most wave stages in the game. Otherwise, it'll be a good idea to try and use more bulky units that won't get juggled by Corey's wave. Camille is likely the first super backline you will fight, with over 550 range. And yes, this is even higher than Master A, and a powerful attack that will make cats like Dragon Cat ineffective against them. Early on, it can once again be tanked quite easily, although in stages like Kuala Lumpur, where it gets proper support, it can be quite a hustle to deal with it. Luckily, Jellyfish Cat can snipe it from afar with its powerful wave. Ichna is a mid-ranger standing at 344 range with lots of damage, health, and knockbacks for the point you encounter him in the game. Ichnas are often stacked, making every cat that can't outrange them quite useless, but it should be manageable to chip them down with any backliner you have in store. They also are guaranteed to knock back units they hit. One of the most memorable stages they're in is Learn to Love, where you rush the 2 Ichnas at the start to try to get to Mina as fast as possible. These 2 are often run killers if you can chain them correctly. Dober PD is very similar to Corey as a traitless waver, except it has a lot of bulk, but without a guaranteed chance to wave. Much like Corey, it has been completely power crept by Octopus. Although if you don't have Octopus, You can abuse Dober's low speed and spam range attackers with no meat shield to not accidentally trigger his wave attack. I'd like to mention the stage Dark Web, where he's paired with other waivers such as Berserkory and Toucan. This stage was the hardest stage the game had ever seen at one point due to the complete lack of wave immune units, but nowadays it is quite trivial if you have wave blockers and wave immune units. And yes, these units are only in the early game, but there's one more unit I want to discuss in the early game before we move on. You see, Rain D is a fast moving enemy with plenty of health. Due to its 20 knockbacks, it has basically no bulk and can be juggled with the right cats. Courier does a great job at that. Rain D has 300 range and deals a lot of damage, so it is a good idea to juggle him before he overwhelms you. Wave attackers later in the game also quite trivialize him, although he can be annoying in the forest piece. Well, what does the mid and late game have to offer? You might ask. Let me show you. Let's get on to the mid game. Our roast actually shows up in the early game, but it's quite the mid game menace. In a poll that I recently did, over 650 people voted it as one of the most annoying enemies in the game. Actually, out of the 4 I chose, it was the most annoying. With its ridiculous pushing power and high HP, he can be extremely hard to deal with. There are so many stages he can be annoying, like Realm of Carnage, where he literally owns the stage, despite Henya being the boss. Caliban's Keeper, where he's paired with Henry for even more, and Inspector Parade, where it is being spammed over and over and over and over again, but I will instead choose to talk about Heaven's Oasis. Often said to be the hardest stage in Stories of Legends, it is paired with Winged Piggy, an enemy which also got 500 votes in the poll, to create a deadly combination that is sure to make you rage. Croakley is a late SOL enemy that has long distance and effective acts like a mini Queen Bee, with its guaranteed chance to slow for a whole minute, making everything slowed by it effectively dead. Croakley depends on his support, as ID makes him easily killable alone. But generally, it should be a good idea to snipe him with extreme range cats like Cyberpunk, or chip him with wave accounts and using slow immune units, making him quite irrelevant. In Forest of Irony, it is accompanied by Boar and Borvim, but luckily they can be freezed quite easily. This stage could be quite a threat when this 4ZL becomes a thing. Mr. Mole is much like Croakley, but instead of a whole minute of slow, it has a knockback, with a decent bit of health and damage, as well as being able to hit units up to 900 range away. He is very annoying to deal with. One of the most annoying stages Mole is in is Nadia's Tomb, where it is stacked to constantly knock back your cats. Dolphina is another ID Traitless enemy with powerful attack and a lot of health that is almost always seen in groups, with its only downside being his abnormally high knockback account of 30. His debut stage, No Return Fights, is where he and other Traitless enemies shine. It used to be the hardest stage, not only in SOL, but in the entire game, but luckily got power creep by cats like Haniwa that can easily stall this Traitless stage, or Courier Cat that can take advantage of Dolphina's 30 knockbacks. Henry is the final ID Traitless enemies in this video, and it has the ability to perma-freeze your units instead of knockbacking and slowing like others. Luckily, it has a huge blind spot, like the others, so it can be easily rushed in. But be careful with your timing, as you don't want your units to get stuck in its freeze. Speedy cats like Courier help plenty here. In Cabion's Keeper, Henry gets his support from our roast, creating another deadly and infuriating combination. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, the late game. Well, you see, Columnus Gallus is a Traitless behemoth variant of Chick-fil-A, with incredibly high HP, immunity to slow and weaken, most frequent and powerful attacks, as well as strengthen. He can be countered with units that can freeze Traitless due to not being immune to it, but that might not always work in the stages he's presented in. Another method I suggest is to rush him down with Hitman Cat, who is also great against wild doges, present in Ape's Lord Revenge, and Haniwa Cat, who can tank a hit at level 43. Well, good luck to the heroes to get to this far stages of the game. Speaking of wild doge, it is the next enemy on our list. Much like Auros, it is an early/mid-game enemy who is especially present in the endgame, due to his 200% magnification, making him insanely difficult to stop. Because he one-shots everything and has a chance to survive, anti-Traitless behemoth eggs like Copcat and previously mentioned Hitman are your only hope against this crazy beast. Mr. Mare is a late UL Traitless enemy that is like an offensive wall doge with only 1 knockback and 1.25 million health and decent damage that stacks up over time with her level 3 miniwaves. She's fortunately rushable with 8 Mecat due to its insane damage output. El Fande Papao is another great Traitless behemoth enemy with lots of health, higher damage, and range that allows it to outrange most of the common Lebon counters. He can push insanely far just on his own, and when present with support like Hockey, Pokey, Forest, your only hope is to stall Niwa and Boulder and hope for the best. You might also want to consider Awakened Ores due to her high range to take this monster. Yes, this is probably one of the hardest enemies in the entire game, and definitely one of the hardest Traitless enemies. And anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video and stayed this far, make sure to subscribe and join our empire.